What's going on? It's Suck and I'm back with a brand new video on SuperDuprTech. In today's video, I'll be bringing you my full and in-depth review of the M2 powered 13-inch MacBook Pro. Also, we are on the road to 5,000 subscribers, so if you are new around here, then I must ask you to hit the subscribe button, clicking the bell icon to be notified of when a new video goes live. But without any further ado, let's hit the titles. So first up, let's get into talking about the design of this MacBook Pro. It indeed has the same external design as the MacBook Pros which were released all the way back in 2016. Other than the changes to the keyboard, if you put them side by side, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart. But regardless of this, it's still made of aluminium and glass and is built very well with no flex to the chassis. It can be purchased in two different finishes, the standard space grey and silver. Unlike the other MacBook Pro models, the keyboard deck is the same colour as the rest of the device. You'll notice the touch bar on the top of the keyboard, which we'll speak more about in just a little. Unlike the M2 powered MacBook Air and the other MacBook Pro models, below the display there is some branding depicting the model. The display has the same 2560 by 1600 resolution, the same 500 nits of brightness, the same True Tone technology, the same P3 color gamut support, the same aspect ratio, the same bezels, refresh rate, and well, you get the idea. It's not to say that it's a bad display, but when placed side by side with the 14-inch MacBook Pros, it really looks dated. And even placing it next to the M2 powered MacBook Air, the bezels on this MacBook Pro really are starting to show their age, and it's clear that this design debuted back in 2016. You will also notice that above the display sits the same 720p FaceTime HD camera, which is crazy considering this MacBook Pro will set you back £1,349. More on this in a little. This new M2 powered MacBook Pro brings with it the same two USB-C ports which are capable of Thunderbolt 3 or USB 4 speeds at 40 gigabits per second, which is still pretty much the fastest port on consumer electronics today. Which also means if you are buying this model, then you may seriously want to consider purchasing some adapters. Perhaps the most disappointing story to tell about these ports is more of an Apple Silicon disadvantage, is they only support one external display. And while there exist methods to have more screens connected, natively it can only support one external display, unless you're using Sidecar or if you're AirPlaying over to an Apple TV. Which means you'll need to get the M1 or M2 Pro or Max MacBook Pro to have more than one external display. These M2 powered MacBook Pro models have the same microphones as the previous M1 models, which had the same as the previous Intel models. Perhaps the M2 chip is processing the audio a little differently this time around. Look at the footage recorded on this webcam and listen to the microphones and let me know if they sound any different. So this is a front FaceTime camera test on the 2022 M2 powered MacBook Pro. You should get a good idea as to how the image quality is, how the audio is, how it's reproducing my voice from the microphones on this machine. It is being recorded at 720p because that's what these webcams were. They're not full HD, they are just normal HD. But yeah, how does it look? The beard, does it look quite sharp? I'm growing my beard a bit, but yeah, how does it look? Does it look decent enough? And let's compare it to the full HD camera found in the 14-inch MacBook Pro. So this is a FaceTime HD camera test of the cameras found on the 14-inch MacBook Pro. So yeah, this should give you a good idea as to what the image quality is going to be like that will be produced directly from this camera, how sharp it looks, how in focus I am, and you should also get a good idea as to how I sound. The speakers on this MacBook Pro also sound unchanged. If anything, it sounds as though it doesn't get louder than the M1 MacBook Pro. And it's certainly not as good as the 14-inch MacBook Pro models. For the longest time now, Apple have been the brand to beat when it comes to trackpads. And while the competition is improving year over year, Apple really has not changed the recipe. If it's not broken, why change, right? It's still incredibly responsive, it's very accurate with fluid gestures. Once you use the machine for a little and try to learn these gestures, they honestly make a lot more sense, and you'll find it allowing you to remain very productive while swiping from one app or desktop to another. Ever since Apple ditched the butterfly keyboards, they have been great. And whilst I can certainly tell that they are not as stable as the butterfly keyboards, they have more depth and travel, making each key press feel a little bit more deliberate. Now I understand why the touch bar is still here, as Apple have reused some of the parts left over in a warehouse somewhere. Although I really struggle to understand why Apple have not improved or implemented new ways to use it ever since 2016. And I'm sure this is the last MacBook that will come with the touch bar, at least in its current state. You'll notice I'm leaving the performance to the end, and there's good reason for it. You've probably heard hundreds of people talk about how well the Apple Silicon in these MacBooks has been performing, and there's no difference here. While the improvements over the M1 have been modest, I wouldn't expect anyone with an M1 MacBook Pro to upgrade strictly for chip improvements. But for those coming from older Intel models, unless you need multiple screens, the improvements on this MacBook Pro are great. While the CPU and GPU have had some solid improvements, there are areas like the SSD performance which is questionable. In fact, compared to the M1, the SSD in the M2 MacBook Pro is slower. If you want your MacBook Pro to have a faster SSD, or at least one which has comparable performance to the SSD found in the M1 MacBook Pro, then you may want to opt for a MacBook Pro with more storage. I've uploaded a video in which I ran several tests on this machine, testing everything from the CPU, GPU, RAM, storage and networking all the way down to the HTML browsing speed. So if you'd like to see that video, then be sure to click the card in the top right corner. But in short, anyone upgrading from a pre-Apple Silicon machine may seriously want to consider this machine, as it performs most tasks better than each previous Intel-based MacBook Pro. Around this price tag, the performance is still quite comparable, although it's not exactly best in class. If you're the type of person that likes to play the odd game here or there on their MacBook, then you'll be pleased to find out that this machine can indeed play a few games like Minecraft, League of Legends, Fortnite and CSGO without any issue. And if you're looking to play some Apple Arcade games, then you'll also find no issue. But most other games, you really do not want them anywhere near this machine. If you'd like to see how this machine performs when a few games are thrown its way, then be sure to click the card in the top right corner or check the links down below in this video's description to be taken to that video. What certainly is best in class is the battery life on this MacBook Pro, as it's been great. Now I had expected this given my previous experience with the M1 MacBook Pro, and boy it didn't disappoint. Standby time on this machine is so long, I kid you not, I could leave it for over a week and come back with almost 30% battery remaining. And with light use, streaming, browsing and typing of documents, it would easily last 14 hours, and that's with this machine also being left on standby overnight for approximately 7 hours. The standby time on this machine is not something to be overlooked, especially if you are a student or someone traveling around who does not want to be left carrying a charger with them. macOS has been good across the board. Now while I've been using it predominantly on my other machines, standout features like universal control work incredibly well. And I love using the keyboard and trackpad from one device on another. Improvements made to Spotlight search have been good, as I have over 70 terabytes worth of storage, so having the ability to search once and scan through all my drives is great. But the addition of being able to view these files within Spotlight helps tremendously. I love grouping tabs together on Safari and linking them to a focus mode, so when I get to the office my work tabs instantly open up, and once I get back home my personal focus mode turns on, allowing me to pick up my browsing where I left off earlier in the day. Stage Manager is once again a hit or miss feature. I feel it's much more powerful and useful on an iPad, as being able to view my desktop in a pinch while I'm working in a file or a program is honestly very useful. So giving that ability up to use Stage Manager just to control my windows is not something that I prefer. FaceTime handoff is such a simple idea that has been executed very well. I love being able to start a call on my iPhone, and when I need to switch across to my MacBook Pro, I only need to tap the trackpad twice to be able to pick up a call on the MacBook Pro, which saves me ringing again, which can be annoying for the person on the other side. I've not ran into many issues, at least from my time using this Mac. The main software issues that I have mainly been around the Home app and controlling HomePod. So in general, macOS has been quite stable for me. So, I mean, it's a Mac, which means a few things like great build, robust software, best in class performance, battery life, which is the talk of the town, although it is locked into Apple's weird image, so upgradability is basically non-existent. Although it has to be said that on this model, if you can touch it or if you can see it, it came from a model that's almost a decade old, which isn't going to do great things when it comes to the resale value of this machine. If you're like most others, then I'm sure you'll probably have the odd USB-A device lying around, which once again means you'll need adapters. But if I'm being honest with you, unless you hate macOS and utterly refuse to give it a go, then you already know that you'll be looking for a Windows laptop. And whilst most Macs are either good, great or best in class when looking at the hardware, I think this particular model is just overall good. It's a good machine at the end of the day. Yes, the battery life is best in class, but for an entry consumer device, when you look at it, if it looks almost a decade old, then most will probably gravitate to other options. And whilst yes, it has the MacBook Pro naming behind it, only true professionals will opt for the 14 or the 16-inch MacBook Pros. And if you happen to be one of those individuals, then be sure to subscribe, as I'm working on no, seriously, be sure to subscribe because next week I've got videos on the 14-inch MacBook Pro coming out, so make sure you're subscribed, as like I say, those videos will be coming out, and in future videos I'll be comparing the entire lineup, so make sure you're subscribed, you don't want to miss out on them. Apple know it, you know it, I know it, everyone knows it. Just because it says MacBook Pro and not MacBook Air or MacBook, although it's got old components in there like the screen, the keyboard, the trackpad, the touch bar, the ports, the overall design of the damn thing, the only thing that's really changed inside of it is the chip. And because of this, people will think that this device is much more better than the previous model M1 MacBook Pro or even the M2 powered MacBook Air, where in some cases it really is not the case, especially from a design perspective, as this machine, whenever I look at it, especially compared to the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros and even the M2 MacBook Air, those bezels, man, they look chunky. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly who this MacBook Pro is more geared towards, and if I'm being honest with you, I think it's high time that Apple need to introduce a 15-inch MacBook Air to kind of cut this 13-inch MacBook Pro out the market. It's not competing with any other devices than potentially its own, MacBook Air and MacBook Pro. So if I'm being honest with you, I really don't think this is a device that Apple should be selling, especially going into the future. Hopefully a 15-inch MacBook Air comes out very soon. And if we see that 15-inch MacBook Air, then I'm very hopeful that there will be an option to equip it with an M2 Pro chip, as it will mean the entry machine will be the M2 powered 13-inch MacBook Air, and there'll be an option for a 15-inch MacBook Air, which will start off with the M2 and will give you options to upgrade to the M2 Pro. And then at £2,149, you then have the M2 Pro in the 14-inch MacBook Pro, which brings with it ProMotion, mini LED, that contrast ratio you get from the screen. It also brings the full HD webcam, the better microphones, the ports, the design. Just overall, it's a better device. So yeah, I feel this is the last time we'll see a MacBook Pro in this shape and form. So that indeed has been it for today's video. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to hit the thumbs up button. If you didn't, then the other one works just as well. If you are new around here and you want to be one of the first 5,000 people to do so, then be sure to subscribe, clicking that bell icon to be notified, of course, when a new video goes live. If you've got any questions, comments, or anything you'd like to point out, then be sure to leave them down below in the comment section, or alternatively, you can hit me up on my social media, Twitter and Instagram. links to which can be found down below in this video's description. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care and have a good one.